So we can vote on the capital projects language.
That's what everybody.
John, do you have the language?
Yeah, everyone got it,
It's
right?
right here.
Oh,
Please read off the one with the star on it.
darn, they look like my sticker.
All right, so why don't we start? Who would like to start?
All right.
All right.
Laura?
Resolved that the Board of Finance recommends that the town of Simsbury appropriate $1,150,000 for the acquisition of open space of approximately 42 acres, parcel C, as described in agreement dated July 11, 2007. The town anticipates receipts of grants in the amount of $500,000 to defray, in part, the appropriation. The appropriation may be spent for survey fees, engineering, and other consultants' fees, legal fees, net temporary interest, other financing costs, and other expenses related to the project and its financing. The Board of Selectmen may determine the particulars and may reduce or modify the scope of the project, and the entire appropriation may be spent on the reduced or modified project, and that the town issue bonds or notes and temporary notes in an amount not to exceed $1,150,000 to finance the appropriation.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next one.
Can we waive these readings, though?
No.
You're going to have to vote to waive, and you might as well just read them.
Resolved that the Board of Finance recommends and approves the appropriation of the town of Simsbury from general fund reserves of $212,000 for the Tariffville connection, improvements to the Farmington River Trail and River Loop multi-use trails, including resurfacing, surfacing signs and fences, and related work. Appropriation also includes consultant fees for updating the Tariffville Park and Simsbury Meadow master plans. The appropriation may be spent for design, engineering, and other consultants' fees, site work, construction, and equipment costs, legal fees, net temporary interest, and other financing costs, and other expenses related to the project and its financing. The Board of Selectmen may determine the particulars and may reduce or modify the scope of the project, and the entire appropriation may be spent on the reduced or modified project.
Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next motion is.
Resolved that the Board of Finance recommends and approves the appropriation by the town of Simsbury from the general fund of $125,000.
General fund reserve.
General fund reserves.
General fund reserves of $125,000 for design and construction of improvements to the Simsbury Farms Golf Course, including drainage, installation and repairs, fairway renovations, green renovations, cart path work, tree replacement, other on-course improvements, and related work. The appropriation may be spent for design and construction costs, survey fees, site work, equipment, materials, furnishings and supplies, architects, engineering, and other consultants' fees, legal fees, net temporary interest, and other financing costs, and other expenses related to the project and its financing. The Board of Selectmen may determine the particulars and may reduce or modify the scope of the project, and the entire appropriation may be spent on the reduced or modified project.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next motion. Linda? Yeah.
Resolved, let me first say that when children wonder why they have to read in front of class, this is why. Resolved that the Board of Finance recommends and approves the appropriation by the town of Simsbury from general fund reserves of $115,000 for design and construction of various bridge improvements and for costs related to the financing thereof. The project is contemplated to include rehabilitation of the bridges, including concrete deck replacement, membrane waterproofing, and bituminous concrete overlay, approach paving and guardrail work, and other related work and improvements as required or desirable. The appropriation may be spent for design, construction, acquisition, and installation costs, right-of-way acquisition, materials, administrative, testing, engineering fees, consultant and legal fees, related improvements, repairs, or renovations, net interest on borrowings, and other financing costs, and other expenses related to the project. The Board of Selectmen may determine the particulars and may reduce or modify the scope, please remove the comma here, of the project, and the entire appropriation may be spent on the reduced or modified project. In fact, that comma is a mistake in every single one of these. It doesn't belong there.
Of the project, you're saying, before of the project?
Correct. Scope of the project, no comma.
Second. With
Any
modification.
discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Resolved that the Board of Finance recommends that the town of Simsbury appropriate $2,500,000 for repaving, repair, and rehabilitation of the town's roadways pursuant to the town's pavement management program, including repair and repaving on existing sections. The project shall include crack sealing, chip sealing, hot-in-place asphalt recycling, heat scarification, milling and overlay, full-depth reconstruction, and related engineering, inspection, testing, and support services. The appropriation may be spent for equipment, materials, land, and easement acquisition, site improvements, materials testing, survey fees, engineering fees, legal fees, net interest on borrowings, and other financial costs and other expenses related to the project or its financing. The Board of Selectmen may determine the particulars and may reduce or modify the scope of the project, and the entire appropriation may be spent on the reduced or modified project, and that the town issue bond or notes and temporary notes in an amount not to exceed $2,500,000 to finance
Which one you read?
the appropriation.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong one. I'm sorry. 2,055,000, okay. Sorry, I was one below you.
Okay.
I'll second it. This is the one we should have part with.
You're bad.
All right, there's a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries.
Resolved that the Board of Finance recommends that the town of Simsbury appropriate $600,000 for design, acquisition, and installation of town-owned technology infrastructure to replace aging equipment. The project shall include fiber optic cable installation and connection, police and town network storage and recovery, printed copy management, software upgrades, and GIS mapping and data management technology, and integrated public safety equipment. The appropriation may be spent for design, engineering, and other consultants' fees, equipment costs, legal fees, net temporary interest, and other financing costs, and other expenses related to the project and its financing. The Board of Selectmen may determine the particulars and may reduce or modify the scope of the project, and the entire appropriation may be spent on the reduced or modified project, and that the town issue bonds or notes and temporary notes in an amount not to exceed $600,000 to finance the appropriation.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Resolved that the Board of Finance recommends and approves the appropriation by the town of Simsbury from the general fund reserves of $103,000 for alternative energy efficiency projects. The appropriation may be spent for design, engineering, feasibility studies, and other consultants' fees, construction costs, equipment costs, legal fees, utility fees, net temporary interest, and other financing costs, and other expenses related to the project and its financing. The project shall include HVAC building, management systems improvements, solar installation, natural gas conversions, and related improvements. The Board of Selectmen may determine the particulars and may reduce or modify the scope of the project, and the entire appropriation may be spent on the reduced or modified project.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next.
Resolved that the Board of Finance recommends and approves the appropriation by the town of Simsbury from general fund reserves of $150,000 for design, acquisition, and installation of a school district-owned network infrastructure to replace aging equipment. The appropriation may be spent for design, engineering, and other consultants' fees, equipment costs, legal fees, net temporary interest and other financing costs, and other expenses related to the project and its financing. The Board of Education may determine the particulars and may reduce or modify the scope of the project, and the entire appropriation may be spent on the reduced or modified project.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries.
Resolved that the Board of Finance recommends that the town of Simsbury appropriate $775,000 relocating and renovation of the main office to improve access control and security for the main office of Henry James Memorial School, incorporating door access control, security cameras, monitors, and infrastructure, and to update telephone, voicemail, alarm systems, sprinkler system, and lighting and related work. The town anticipates receipts of grants to defray in part the appropriation. The appropriation may be spent for equipment, furnishings, materials, legal fees, net interest on borrowings, and other financing costs, and other expenses related to the project or its financing. The Board of Education may determine the particulars and may reduce or modify the scope of the project, and the entire appropriation may be spent on the reduced or modified project, and that the town issue bonds or notes and temporary notes in an amount not to exceed $775,000 to finance the appropriation.
Any discussion?
Can we just fix the grammatical problem in the language?
Sure.
In the first, let's see, the third line, $775,000 relocating and renovation should be relocating and renovating the main office.
Okay, so the language is going to say, read it again, please, right after the 775?
After the 775, relocating and renovating. Oh, and take out the word of, relocating and renovating the main office.
What's wrong with the way it is?
It's not parallel construction.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
Look at the same one for the squadron line, it's just missing the word "for" before that. They would otherwise read the same for relocating.
For relocating.
For relocating.
For relocating and renovating.
So what do we want us to say?
I think what,
It just appears to be the
Okay, yes,
word
so
"for."
it should be for relocating and renovating the main office.
So so we put for in front of relocating, and then instead of renovation, we say
Renovating
renovating.
the main office.
Does that make sense? Renovation.
Renovation of the main office.
Well, it's not, all right, it's not parallel construction, but if you want to leave it that way, it's fine.
So we put for relocating and renovation of the main office?
yes.
Relocating.
That would be consistent with your language on page 4 for the squadron line, very similar wording.
Ask an English teacher.
Are we correct?
Sounds grammatical, it's got a preposition.
I'm sure you're right.
I became an accountant for certain reasons.
And renovating.
Only a few numbers.
Okay, we have a second.
We had a second. All right. So we know what we're voting on. The language we're voting on is for relocating and renovation?
Renovating.
Renovating
The main,
Right.
Okay.
You want them to be parallel.
of the main office, all right? So we got that? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Got it.
Resolved that the Board of Finance recommends and approves the appropriation by the town of Simsbury from general fund reserves of $250,000 for the renovations and costs in connection with the reconstruction of the athletic fields and tracks, including resurfacing, regrading, installation of drainage and irrigation systems. The appropriation may be spent for design, construction, and installation costs, equipment, materials, engineering, inspection, and consultant fees, administrative costs, legal fees, net interest on borrowings, and other financing costs, and other expenses related to the project and its financing. The Board of Education may determine the particulars and may reduce or modify the scope of the project, and the entire appropriation may be spent on the reduced or modified project.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Resolved that the Board of Finance recommends the town of Simsbury appropriate $1,050,000 for the relocation and
Renovation.
the renovation.
That's correct.
That's
And the
correct.
renovation of the main office and adjacent nursing office to improve access control and security at the Squadron Line Elementary Schools, incorporating door access controls, security cameras, monitors, and infrastructure to move and update telephone, voicemail, alarm systems, lighting, hazardous material abatement, and related work. The appropriation may be spent for equipment, furnishings, materials, site improvements, legal fees, net temporary interest and other financing costs, and other expenses related to the project and its financing. The Board of Education may determine the particulars and may reduce or modify the scope of the project, and the entire appropriation may be spent on the reduced or modified project. And the town issue bonds or notes and temporary notes in the amount not to exceed $1,050,000 to finance the appropriation.
Second? Any
I just
discussion?
recommend the deletion of the S after Squadron Line Elementary Schools, since I think there's just one.
One school?
Yep, one
Schools?
So that S, do we know?
only one
Says it
school.
doesn't belong there.
Okay, so we got that? Okay,
I read it as it was written,
okay.
I think.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next motion.
We just don't want these to go out in public with grammatical errors, especially when it's for the Board of Ed.
Linda, could you read the next one, please?
Resolved that the Board of Finance recommends that the town of Simsbury appropriate from the sewer use fund $65,000 for costs in connection with the improvements to the SCADA controls and pump upgrade at the Longview Drive Pump Station. The appropriation may be spent for design, construction, and installation costs, equipment, materials, engineering, inspection and consultant fees, administrative costs, legal fees, and other expenses related to the project. The Water Pollution Control Authority may determine the particulars and may reduce or modify the scope of the project, and the entire appropriation may be spent on the reduced or modified project.
Second.
Any discussion?
Do we need to spell out what SCADA stands for, so people know? I don't know what it stands for.
Bond counsel says no.
Okay.
Go with bond counsel. All those in favor?
Anyone got a clue? what it
Aye.
stands for?
Any opposed?
SCADA?
Motion carries. You voted for it, I assume, Linda? Linda voted?
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know what SCADA stands for, but
It's a SCADA control and pump upgrade.
we don't want polluted water.
Resolved that the Board of Finance recommends that the town of Simsbury appropriate from the sewer use fund $156,000 for costs in connection with sewer main extensions in the area of Battenwood Drive. I hate to be a pain, but is that Battenwood or Buttonwood?
Buttonwood?
Right? It should be
It'd be
Buttonwood,
Buttonwood.
right?
I don't think there's a
Yeah.
Battenwood in Simsbury.
Costs in connection with sewer main extensions in the area of Buttonwood Drive, Longview Drive, Musket Trail, no S, Flint Rock Ridge, Hawks Lane, or other areas following a review by the Planning and Zoning Commission pursuant to Section 8-24 of the Connecticut General Statutes, revision of 1958 as amended. The appropriation may be spent for design, construction, and installation costs, equipment, materials, engineering, part-time employees, inspection, and consultant fees, administrative costs, legal fees, and other expenses related to the project. The Water Pollution Control Authority may determine the particulars and may reduce or modify the scope of the project, and the entire appropriation may be spent on the reduced or modified project.
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
This is a little bit like saying at the Passover, just going around the room and reading resolutions. And
That's it?
all good. Let my people go. Okay. Resolved that the Board of Finance recommends that the town of Simsbury appropriate from the sewer use fund $260,000 for costs in connection with installation of an inline grinder and screening unit at the wastewater treatment facility. The appropriation may be spent for design, construction, and installation costs, equipment, materials, engineering, inspection, and consultant fees, administrative costs, legal fees, and other expenses related to the project. The Water Pollution Control Authority may determine the particulars and may reduce or modify the scope of the project, and the entire appropriation may be spent on the reduced or modified project.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. The last resolution is about the terms of the bond. So we've now approved all the monies that we're going to bring. This talks about bond term for the ones that we agreed to bond. Do you want to read it in and then discuss it? Or how do you want to proceed? If people,
Well, does the bold
Discuss it
section in
first.
brackets need to be read or not?
That's if you want to.
right.
Well, we need to discuss it. I mean, are we...
Why don't we just discuss, I mean, as far as this, let's discuss our thoughts. I mean, we have for bond, we have open space land of about $650,000, right? you have, let's go slow, the $2.5 million for the roads, right?
Right.
You have
600
600 for the design, there's no net there, right?
for the technology.
Technology. You have, from the renovation of Henry James, 775, there'll be some reimbursement, so that number won't be the full 775, it'll be about 400, 500,000. You then have the same thing on Squadron Line, about 700,000 for office relocation. So that's it. So basically, you got a small piece of land, the roads, which we're arguing whether they should be operating or maintenance, and 2 other projects.
Well, there's no reason we'd want to go less than 10 years, right?
No.
Is there any reason we want to go more than 10 years?
I could argue in favor of more than 10 years for certain of these projects. Not the highway pavement, because obviously we're trying to get away from that. Technology, I'd say no, because it doesn't last 10 years before it's obsolete. But the Ethel Walker land in particular is, something that's going to be there in perpetuity for generations to come. And the 2 school projects also presumably will last longer than 10 years. I don't know, I'd defer to the Board of Ed on those. But certainly the land would be something I'd be comfortable bonding over a longer period of time.
Question. If we broke out and said we wanted to do 15 years, let's say, for these 3 projects, do we have to bond separately than our 10-year bond?
No. It would all be one. I can bond different projects over different increments at the same time. It's
It's not going to incur any different costs, so we don't have to, we can do the same bond, but just take a piece of it and make
it'll
it
be
longer?
different rate, but
What is the rate differential, do you think, roughly?
mild, maybe 25 basis points if that.
If that.
far.
So is it worth it then? I mean, you end up, my
always talk about
concern
six.
is always you end up paying more in the long run for if you stretch it
about-
out longer, but
You're only talking about financing, which, I mean, really the only project you want to go beyond 10 years is Ethel Walker.
Ethel Walker.
It's small
I mean, you can
dollars.
talk
And
about
it's
the
pretty
nickel dime
small.
stuff with the Henry James, which is 517 after the
Yeah.
reimbursement. Well, Squadron Line's 700, so
I would think, though, if you get a larger, that's when you want to probably go longer, like we did the high school. If you got a bigger chunk, I can see your theory on the land, but with the size,
It's pretty small.
My only concern would be if the grant doesn't come through.
yeah.
Then you're at 1.15 for something that would be used for generations
Plus
to come.
1, yeah.
yeah.
I don't know.
But it doesn't lower your debt service that much on a, so it's immaterial
I mean,
then.
each of these bonds is going to get broken up into 10 or 15 tranches that
Yeah.
will all have different interest costs and so forth associated with them. So, it's a little hard to try and even.
Right.
But the tranches for, year 11, we're talking about, 1/15 of, what's the net cost going to be, 650,000? It's almost peanuts.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Just wanted to consider it.
So, I mean, well, that's what we have to do each time, and it's fair, it's reasonable. And there'll come a time when it's a more relevant discussion, I think, and,
I mean, I can give you, these are rough numbers, but if you're talking about financing $1.8 million over 10 years, I traditionally do a level principal payment, meaning the same principal amount every year. That's actually the way that bonds are structured. But so you'd be talking $180,000 a year over those 10 years just on principal. Extend it out over 15 years, now you're talking 110. So you're not talking about big numbers. If you guys are looking at extending terms, I would recommend you guys do it for the larger projects.
Yeah.
You guys have
Okay.
something in the pipeline in 3 to 4 years. Should you determine to do
Right.
it, then I would recommend doing it for
Or
you.
if we needed the financial flexibility of
Right.
going longer.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm good with that.
okay, everyone feel comfortable? So, if you want to read our language?
So I don't need the brackets, right?
I guess not.
Resolved that the Board of Finance of the Town of Simsbury recommends, 1, that any bonds issued to implement the various capital improvement projects recommended at this meeting be issued for a term not to exceed 10 years. 2, that the maximum term of any bond issued to refund any bond anticipation notes to be reduced by the period of time that the bond anticipation notes are outstanding in excess of 2 years. And 3, that the town retire any such notes which are outstanding in excess of 2 years in an amount equal to at least 1/10 of such notes. I don't know if I need to read that. Of such notes, no later than 3 years from the date of the initial borrowing, and again, no later than 4 years from the date of the initial note borrowing.
Boy, was that Greek or what?
Do I need that? I don't
blank?
think I need that phrase in there, right?
Let's get a second, then we'll talk about it.
Second. I don't think we need it, because we're saying to at least 1/10 level fund.
We need to have, I mean, I think what it is it's trying to say that we can't just keep stringing out not paying our debt. I think that's what we're trying to say here.
Yeah, hypothetically, I could go and just start issuing bans.
Right.
And continue to roll them indefinitely.
Right. So we're trying to tie his hands to say you have to, one of these days we have to start making payment on this. So I think that's what we're trying to do here.
I can show you.
It sounds like a lot of
Gobbledygook.
gobbledygook, but in the financial terms, I think it makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. So
So we
People
don't need
comfortable?
it or blank.
But that phrase that's there, what would I fill the blank in with?
That was,
if I-
that's what we've done the except for.
Yeah. So what you're basically making me do is, rather than me rolling bans every year, is after I go through 2 years, you're now making me pay principal on it.
Right.
right.
In bond council language, which some,
Right. People go to school a long time to write this, so I,
3 years.
It is scary.
so we have a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Now, are we done, are we, for the ones that have to go to referendum, the 3, we don't have to spike on any special language? We are done?
You're done. The Board of Selectmen will read the questions into the record and vote on those tomorrow.
okay. But we look forward to having the same conversation next year.
All right. We are done with our business of tonight, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Do anything with the Board of Ed?
Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Oh, I want to stay longer.